This is Gemara Metziah, Daf Peites, and we pick it up on Peites Amid Aleph. We're about 8 lines down. The first word on the line is Oichel. And again, a reminder, Torah, anytime the annual fundraiser is going on, probably while you're watching the shiur. So let's give a few dollars. I guess we did the math. If every person who learned every daf gave literally a few dollars, I would quickly hit my goal, and Mirza Hashem, we'd each be able to do our part. Incredible schos hatayra. Tanu Rabbanan, says the Gemara, continuing discussing the halachais of that which the worker is allowed to eat while he works. Tanu Rabbanan dayish, says the pasuk, dayish, threshing. And from there we learn ma'dayish miyuchad davar shegidulei karka. The pasuk, when it talks about the iser chasima, to muzzle your animal, says the pasuk dayish. From there, just like we learn that just like dayish is miyuchad, that involves something that gedulei karka and upaya leichel bay, and the worker eats from it. So too, avkol shegedulei karka upaya leichel bay. So too, anything that grows in the ground, the worker can eat while he is working. Yatza, this excludes achaylev, one who milks a cow, v'amechabetz, one who makes cheese, milk solids, v'amegabein, presses the cheese, she'ein gidulei karka. These are all entities that do not grow from the ground, and therefore, ve'ein payal oichel bay, says the Brisa, a worker cannot eat it. So from the word dayish, we are learning that only entities that are growing from the ground is that which the worker could eat, and not that which is not. Says the Gemara Alamali, what is the reason that we need this pasuk of dayish? Why don't we learn out? Learn it out for the pasuk that says when you come into the karem of your friend, which as well, a karen grows from the ground, so it should teach us the same limud. Explains the Gemara, itzrich. We still need the pasuk of dayish. I would have thought hayol ksif kama, since the pasuk says kama the rabbis kobale kama, which comes to include all items of standing type similar to standing grain. The rabbis nami midi delav gedule karkininu. So maybe it could even teach not only that which grows from the ground, but even that which does not grow from the ground. Kamash Malan, therefore the pasuk dayish to teach me no, only that which is dayish, only that which grows from the ground. Says the Gemara, another brisa. So that's brisa number 1. Dayish coming to say not like kama, not like don't expand and learn out anything, but only that which is dayish, which goes from the ground. Tanya idach dayish. 20 lines down. The first line is dayish. Continues the Gemara. Says the Brisa, ma dayish miuchad, davar shebeshas gemar melacha paya leichel bay. Just like dayish is miuchad in that when the work is complete, the worker eats from it. Avkol shu beshas gemar melacha paya leichel bay. So too, anything that at the time that it is complete, the worker eats from it. And over here, yatza menachesh v'shuman. What do we exclude? We exclude one who weeds out garlic or onions. Hayel ve'ein gemar melacham, ein payel oichel bay. Since since it is not to the completion of the work, by weeding out the not good items from amongst the good items by the garlic or onion field, therefore a worker cannot eat them, because weeding is not considered the harvest, is not considered the removal of the product in its final stage. Says the Gemara, Lamali, why do we need this? Drasha, meve'el kilecha lo sitei nafka. Starting it out from the fact that it says, Vel kilecha lo sitei, don't put it in your vessel. From here we learn that only at the time of the Gemar Melacha could you eat it. Explains the Gemara, lo yitzricha afagav kamashliv katini mi beini alimi. Even though you're pulling out the stunted onions from amongst the large onions, meaning even though at some level the item that you're pulling out is complete, but because it's within the guise, it's in the process of weeding, of removing smaller from larger. Therefore, you're not allowed to eat from it. And that's the second limud from Dayish. Continues the Gemara, Tani Idach Dayish, smack in the middle of the Amid. The first word on the line is Katini. Ma Dayish, miyuchad avashel nigmur malachtai. Threshing is at a point which is not a complete work, lemaiser, and yet the payal is eichel boy. And even though it's not at the complete work with regard to meiser, still the payal is allowed to eat from it. Av kol shloi nigmur malachta lemaiser, still payal eichel boy. Even though it's not the complete work with regard to meiser, the worker could eat from it. And the reason for this is that at the threshing stage, all you're doing is you're separating the wheat, the two halves, the good from the bad, the kernel from the husk. However, what do you still need to do? You got to throw it in the air, you got to winnow it, and you got to make a pile, and you got to smooth out the pile. And then there's a chiyah meiser. So even though you're not at its finale, you're not at the point to take off meiser, still we learn now, payel, eichel bayim. Yatsa, what does this include? If someone separates dates or dried figs, since those entities are complete with regard to meiser, ein payal eichel bay, a worker does not eat from it. Asks the Gemara Vatanya. But we learned in our brayza, abaydal b'tamara McGregor's payal eichel bay a direct stira. Amar Papa. Excuse me, I didn't realize you can't see the page. I apologize. Amar Papa kitanya, what's that brayza talking about? Betoichlani, non-ripened dates, and that's the reason why over there. That's the reason why the brayza said over there that you could eat from it, because the reason is, the brayza says you can't eat from it. It's talking about these non-ripe dates because they still need to ripen. The brayza says you could eat from it is talking about ripe dates. Continues the Gemara with a fourth braysa. Tanya idach adayish. 20 lines to the bottom. The first word line is dayish. We learn now it's not considered a complete entity with regard to chalo. Yatsa, what does this exclude? Halash v'mekatev needs, shapes, and bakes the dough, which is, of course, nigmru malachton lechalo. Dein payel oichal boy. Ask the Gemara 1 second. At that stage you take of challah, it's as well as stage you take of meiser. So of course the payel should be able to eat it. Says Mardimin, there's no chal and chutzar either. If anyone's wondering what it means, we do take off chal and chutzar. That's all. Din dirabanan midiraisa to mitzvah tzliya ba'aretz. Says the Gemara la'ilam ba'aretz. V'loi kasha b'sheva shekivshu b'sheva shel cholku. The bracelet says that challah is the time at which the worker could eat from it is the 7 years that they conquered Eretz Yisrael and they split up amongst all the Shvatim. Da'amar mar, Sheva shekivshu, the 7 years that they conquered Eretz Yisrael, v'sheva shechelku, in 7 years they divided it in nischayvu, b'chala, they are chayiv and chala, v'loi, nischayvu b'maiser, but at that point, they're not chayiv and maiser. That's why it made sense to split it, to say that there's a chayiv and chala, even though there's no chayiv in maiser. Ask the Gemara, Midim Meiser Kagarim, Gemar Melacha Kagarim. Who cares about Meiser? It's a Gemar Melacha. So if there's a Gemar Melacha, therefore the payil should be able to eat it. Ella Amar Ravina. So rather comes like Ravina with a new teretz, 10 lines to the bottom. The first one in line is Kagarim. Again, this is of teretz, how to explain the fourth brayso of Dayish, Kroch Vitani. Dayish, read it together. Ma dayish miyuchad davar shel nigru malachta lemaiser ulechala upayal eichel bay. Of course, nigru malachta lemaiser chala upayal eichel bay. And that's really part A of today's shir, which is the 4 braysos of dayish and their limudim. We have dayish davar shegidulei karka. We have dayish davar shebshas gemar melachta b'olechel bai. We have dayish davar miyuchad shaloi nigmur melachta l'maiser, and then chala, and then the last one we put the two chala and maiser together. Ibai leho asked the Gemara 5 lines from the bottom. Poyel mahu sheyahavei v'ba'ar. What is the status of a worker? Is he allowed to toast the produce and then eat it? It's considered like a novim v'davar acher, a brace that we had 2 days ago, that you're not allowed to eat it together with anything else that's going to increase your appetite. So the question is, when I go and I toast the grain, maybe it's going to increase that which I want to eat, and therefore it's not allowed. Tashema, let's bring a raya. Rashai balabayis lahashkois ba'aliyayin. The balabayis allowed to give the workers wine. Why? Kadesh le'yachlan avim harvi does want them to eat a lot of grapes. Rashayim pailin the tavel pita bitzir. The workers allowed to dip their bread in brine. Kadesh le'yachlan avim harvi. The opposite, they want to eat a lot. We turn over to Peites Amid Beis. Lachshuri Gavra Lokami Bailan. So whether the person himself is allowed to do something that either increases or decreases his appetite, that was not the kasha, says the Gemara. Ki Kami Bailan. What was the kasha on the second line of Peites Amid Beis? Lachshuri Peira Mahu. To make the Peiros into an entity that's going to be had with a greater appetite. My. So Tashema, now we bring a raya pilot eichlan and oven brayshiyum noyos shalahen. A worker can eat grapes at the head of the rows. Ubelvad sheyahavavu be'or. So as long as they don't toast the grapes in fire. So we see explicitly in this brayso that you're not allowed to do something to the item that's going to enhance and increase one's appetite. Says the Gemara, no raya hasam shabita malacha. Over there, just because it's going to take more time. Could his wife, could his child prepare by toasting the item for him? That was the kasha. So we don't have a raya yet. So Tashema, 6 lines down, says the Bryce, one cannot toast in a fire and eat it. He cannot heat it in the ground. He cannot smash it on a rack, which sweetens the olives. But he's allowed to crush it between his hands. So what do we see clearly? That you're not allowed to toast the produce. Says Gemara, and guess what? The price talk about betum malacha. Because if it's talking about sweetening the fruit, what sweetening is there by crushing it on the rack? Says, 1 minute, of course it gets a little bit sweeter when you crush it. So Tashema, try to bring another raya. Because again, the raya that we just brought didn't work because we said it's about bitul malach and it makes a lot of sense. So tries the Gemara again. They're picking figs, or they to bite anavim and grapes, and olives. You're allowed to eat them, and you're pater from Meiser. Because the Torah is zeicha, allows you to eat it. But says the Bryce, you're not allowed to eat it with your bread. Lest the Balabayis gives you rishos. And similarly, you cannot dip it into salt and eat it. Says the Gemara, so what's the raya? We see just like you're not allowed to dip it into salt, which will increase your appetite, so too we think you're not allowed to toast it. Says we're no raya, melech vadika novim davar acher dami. Melech is too much, it's extreme, and therefore it doesn't necessarily prove to us anything about our shaila, which is merely toasting the grain a little bit. The Gemara leaves the shaila and continues the Gemara with a new detail. Says the Gemara, quoting the previous aforementioned brisa, which was what? You're not allowed to dip it into the salt and eat it. Veraminu, asked the Gemara, stira from another brisa that teaches us. Someone hires a work to hoe or to uncover the roots under the olives. That worker cannot eat. However, if you hired him to pick grapes, if you hired him to pick olives, char lalaki, the arzim together, other fruits, then a yes are izaychel upater. Shah Torah zeslem, because the Torah is zeichet to him. Kotzatz achas va'achas yoichel. If he stipulated that achas va'achas yoichel, he can eat them one at a time, then that's what he does. Shtayim lo yoichel. If he stipulated he eats two at a time, then he cannot. V'soifes v'melach v'yoichel. And he can dip it into salt and eat it. End of Brisa. So says the Gemara, what case is this last detail of salting going on? If it's going the last case of kotzatz, so you made a stipulation, who cares? Alava reisha must be going in the reisha that you're going within the din daraisa, what you're allowed to eat. And what do we see? We see you're allowed to salt it and eat it. So the Gemara brings a proof that you're allowed to do something to the item to sweeten it. Amar Abaye lo kasha kan ba'aretz, kan b'chutz la'aretz. Ba'aretz kavas savita. In Eretz Yisrael, when you dip it, it makes it a chiyah meiser. B'chutz la'aretz lo kavas savita. If you can't bring a raya. Amar Rava mika midi. Tebaretz kavas savita midaraisa b'chutz la'aretz kavas savita motel lechatchila. Says Rava, can't be. You have two extremes. Over there, it's going to be daraisa and chutz la'aretz be mutter gamer. Ela Amar Rava. And with this we conclude, rather it teaches Rava. Bein ba'aretz, bein b'chutz la'aretz, chada loy kavas vita. Tarti kavas vita. Says Rava, it has to do with how much you're eating. If you're eating one at a time, dipping in salt is no chiyah meiser. Two, there is kotzatz bein zafas, whether you dipped it, bein loy zafas. Whether you did not dip it, achas v'achas oichel, eat one at a time, but shtayim. Loy oichel, loy kotzatz, if you didn't dip it. V'loy zafas, and you didn't dip. Then oichel shtayim, let eat two. Zafas, if you did, achas oichel shtayim, loy oichel. Ba'afal gav, then also rishos b'bal abayis. Even though you took rishos from the bal abayis, why? Because once you ate two at a time, they became tevel and chayv and meiser v'kavas vita. Says the Gemara v'tarti the kavas vita menolan. Where do we know that eating two at a time makes it a chayv and meiser? Amar Rav Masda damar kroki kavah kamir. Garna says the pasuk, you gather them like sheaves to the threshing floor, meaning at the point in which it is completed, that's when you have the gathering. That is the reason when there's going to be a chiv and meiser. So the Gemara Rav is concluding they have to really put the whole brisa together, both the case of sfita and the case of dipping. And that's when we'll know what the din is going to be with regard to adding salt. Only in that scenario. We'll pick it up from here. B'siyata d'ishmaya.